All right, so yesterday someone left this comment on um, my channel, and I thought it was very relevant. You'd think they'd remember slaves weren't enthusiastic either, and despite food to a starving slave as motivation, it doesn't make the slave a top performer. When I put that in, it generated this title: Why Bare Minimum Effort is a Symptom. And I think that many employers don't realize how demoralized, how much people really don't like their jobs, or how the pay is very unsatisfactory because it leads to a life in which you're not thriving. And when you're not thriving, you don't feel well about anything that you're doing. In fact, I have to go back to Evil Corp in less than 24 hours, and I can already feel panicky. I can feel anxious. I can feel more depression. I feel everything that went away as I was not having to go to work for 15 days. And it felt like that time just passed too quickly because my days were the same. Like most proletariat men, my day would start with the gym. First, I'd work on YouTube, then I'd go to the gym, then I'd come back and work on YouTube, and then I would go run errands, and then I'd come back, work on YouTube, then go to the gym for a second time, then come back and work on YouTube more. If you guys don't think this is a job, I beg to differ. In fact, someone also left this comment yesterday that I should create another channel and show people how to make faceless dystopian content. And to that, I'm going to reply that it's not that easy. Coming out here and coming up with video ideas, writing scripts, being able to speak is a talent in and of itself that most people don't have. If you've talked to the average person in the last week or so, you know that most of us are NPCs. We have pre-programmed responses to everything. Like when I come back to work and someone asks me about how my vacation was, I'm going to tell them this: Hawaii was amazing. And if they want any more details, I'm just going to repeat that because they don't really care what you why you weren't at work. In fact, most people don't even care themselves. So when you think about it, your boss doesn't want to be there. Your coworkers don't want to be there. No one wants to be at work, but we're all stuck pretending to be grateful for a job, to have steady employment. Because remember, having a steady job isn't a right, it's a privilege. Remember that. Next time you go to work and you're doing some menial task that you've done a million times before, and the boss comes up to you and asks you why you're not working faster, just tell him that work is a privilege. That he has the privilege to have employees, not the other way around. So, with that said, I wanted to do this video in story format. I think I'm going to start doing all my videos in story format because it's just more appealing than cold talking points created by ChatGPT. The stories are much more personal, and I think that it gives a lot more credence to the channel to tell this these stories from the perspective of very poor people because we can relate because we are all very poor people that are out here trying to figure out what's going to happen next. From day to day, we watch the news and we wonder what's going to happen on January 20th. We don't have that much long left before something that we don't like happens. And with that said, let's get into my three lines from this particular story. And we're going to start with setting the scene because I find this fascinating because ChatGPT understands where we live. It understands how we feel. It understands that we have no future. And when it creates these moods for the story, I think it's very relevant as to how it sees us as a failed society. Because at the bottom, we are definitely a failed world. So let's get into the background for this particular scene. A dimly lit kitchen. A camera pans across an empty fridge. A stack of overdue bills. A worn out woman sitting at a small table with her head in her hands. She looks up at the camera. Here we go. They call it laziness. They say we're not trying hard enough. But what they don't want you to know is that sometimes the bare minimum is the only way to survive. I've come to that conclusion that no matter how much effort you put into your parole job, it will never be enough. After I got my last review and across the board I was incompetent at my job, it really set a tone for me. All those missed breaks, all those lunches I worked straight through for 3 years, all of that time that I gave to Evil Corp just to be told I was incompetent and that I should face termination. It doesn't make any sense to me, other than the bare minimum is truly where they're pushing people to. If most people show up to work an 8 hour shift with the intent of only working a few hours and then pretending to work, which is something I've seen throughout my entire life, that once people come back from lunch or mid afternoon, especially on Fridays, I have no idea why they have people working on Fridays. You're burnt out from the week, you're stressed out, you have no money, and somehow you're expected to show up at work with the enthusiasm of a of a newborn for life, and you just don't have it. You can't fake the funk. Even at company pizza parties, you look around the room at the other proles and you can see it in their eyes. There's no life there. We're just pretending to be alive. I would say that even more than workplace theater, most of us have already gone out. There's no creativity on the average in the average day for the proletariat. We go to soul crushing jobs where your boss makes it clear that you're not welcome. At the same time, they wonder why no one will stay at this job because it sucks. So there's this back and forth between an employer who doesn't like you, you don't like your employer, but you have to pretend that you're okay. And as I say in a lot of my videos, the proletariat's not okay. The proletariat's on life support, and it has been for a very long time. Someone was talking about how the world we live in isn't the world that they grew up in the 80s. He claimed to be a Gen Xer, and I agree. The world from when I was a child to the world that is now is very different. The world today seems much more cruel and hell bent on making people suffer, with wages at all time lows. And I've said this for years. This isn't something new that I've said, is that the wages, the buying power of your paycheck has been significantly lowered through inflation, and it's never going to come back. They have chosen to treat poor people in the worst possible way, with denying them the simple pleasures in life. And most of us won't know the world that I grew up in because I never saw my parents suffer like this. I never saw people down and out working a 40-hour work week and then having to somehow squeeze in another 40 hours or maybe another 40 hours plus another 20 hours, a full-time job, then a part-time job. Because I work a lot. You guys have been on my channel for any amount of time. You know that as long as I have time, I'm creating content. And I know I can't produce the high level content that I want. I wish that I had more time for editing, more time for research, more time for everything. But you have to remember, most of us have a regular full time job. And being a top performer at your job isn't anything special anymore. You know, throughout my entire life, and I was going to say career, and I haven't had any careers. I've had jobs. You see lazy Johnny Sixpack making the same amount of money that the guy who gives 110% does. And when it comes to people who get fired, average Johnny Sixpack has the same potential for being laid off or being fired because of the economy. Because when it comes to saving money, the pros are the first to go. So whether you're performing at a high level or a low level, chances are you have no protection. You have no job security. In fact, I saw that with someone who was working a sales job, and she was the top salesperson. But because she met her points, oh, you gotta love the point system, because she wanted to have a life. She didn't want there to be a limitation on how much time that she could take off to go see her family and be with her friends. So even though she didn't have the time off, she would take it off. And every time she took a day off that she didn't have available because she didn't have any accrued time, because there are jobs where they just expect you to work. The hourly job with no benefits of any kind, where I spent nearly 20 years of my life as a low level employee at the university that had no paid holidays, no sick leave, no health benefits, and it only paid you when you were sitting in that seat working. Jobs like that are the equivalent of already being checked out of reality. You're not getting anything out of this job. And unfortunately, for a lot of low level employees, living under those conditions is very normal. I've spent most of my adult life without health benefits. And even when I do have health benefits, I don't have the time to use them. Like, I was supposed to go into the doctor tomorrow, but I don't have any more time off from work. And the worst part is that you need work in order to have health benefits, but work gets in the way of you using your health benefits, but you still have to pay for them. It's a catch 22 that I'll never understand. Anyhow, I'm off on a horrible tangent. Let's get back into my second talking point here. When you're just trying to keep the lights on, when every paycheck barely gets you to the next week, where are you supposed to find the energy to go above and beyond? Every week they send out a newsletter that actually is called that at the Evil Corp I work at. And you wonder, you look at these people that some have been there for a very long time. And even these people, because every month they send out the anniversary newsletter, right? Of who's turning how many years old at the corporation. And I turned 3 years this month at this corporation, and I don't feel like that time was well spent. But in the scene for this is the scene that this last comment was spoken of. The woman at her job, stocking shelves, wiping sweat from her brow, her boss watching her from afar, arms crossed. I have felt that. I have truly felt that when I had my boss take me into the office to yell at me for being lazy. And I was just like, sometimes you just scratch your head and you're like, I'm lazy while I'm managing all of this, and I'm not getting paid for all of this to manage this department. And you're going to stand there with arms crossed and pretend that I'm the worst employee you've ever seen when this department has the worst turnover of any area within that section of the corporation. Everyone around me has left the company, either through termination or self termination. But everyone is gone. There's not a single person left in my area. That includes 5 senior managers, including my last one, that was demoted based on their job performance. And so you have a person who was the senior manager over my position. They saw how crappy he was at his job, and rather than terminating him, they just moved him somewhere else. And that left me now as the fully in control person over my department, which again doesn't make any sense when it comes to increased pay or a senior level job title. But as I've told coworkers in the past, The corporation gets nothing out of giving you a title change other than giving you something to put on your resume that makes you look better than you actually are, because that's what titles are. Titles are something that you can put on your resume in order to make your application to a better job more appealing. But Evil Corp doesn't get anything by giving you experience, titles. They they would create a scenario in which the employees would start using the experience that they were getting to get better jobs, and they don't benefit from that. The last thing that Evil Corp wants to do is allow its employees to benefit from it in some conceivable way that doesn't benefit the corporation. That's why most people are stuck in their dead end jobs for as long as they want to stay there, because it's designed to keep you stuck. So let's get into our third talking point before I run out of time here. What they won't tell you is that the bare minimum is a symptom, not of laziness, but of exhaustion. It's the human response to being stretched too thin for too long. In the background of this scene, you have cut to her coworker asking her to take an extra shift. She hesitates, her eyes weary, before quietly shaking her head. No. And that's what it comes down to. At my Evil Corp, after the 40-hour work week, they look for people who will cover weekends and nights on the weekend, because there just isn't enough people to do all the work, which they have acknowledged on many occasions that for 5 people to manage thousands of work requests every month is nearly impossible. The people that are there are stretched to the thinnest possible level. Stress, burnout, and anxiety in the workplace. I see it every day. I may not be part of the technology group, but I still have to manage everything that they need as part of my job. So I still have to interact with them, and sometimes they'll call me just to get a break from being on the phone for more than 8 hours a day. These people are stretched. Eight is the starting, right? 12 to 14 hours a day is kind of what's expected. You have people who punch in at 7 o'clock and punch out at 8, 9 o'clock. You have people who will work 30 days straight. I couldn't imagine. I worked 15 days straight once because we were having a lot of problems in the department, a lot of very complicated problems. So I had to come in and work one weekend, the whole weekend. Then I came in and I worked part of the next weekend. And I was like, you know what? I can't do this job without breaks from it. And the worst part is not the job just doesn't end when you leave. Like last night, I mean, I have been awake and tossing and turning now for the past 6 hours as I think about what's going to be waiting for me in the office from being gone for so many days in a row. I'm going to have a bare minimum of 1,000 emails that I'm going to have to go through, probably hundreds of messages through the Messenger app, and who knows how many phone calls. So the second I sit back down at Evil Corp after coming back from vacation is just going to be, they're going to flip the switch and light me up. And I'm just going to look at it and I'm just going to be like, you know what? You can't motivate slaves with this type of toxic workplace. The slave isn't motivated anymore when there's nothing to look forward to. Food and shelter isn't motivating anyone anymore, and it hasn't for a very long time, especially when you talk about the extremely low quality of the shelter. I mean, $1,800 to live in a place that's not worth $10. And then you wonder why people are showing up at work with this mentality that they just they can't do it for prolonged periods of time. So this is what I put into toxic positivity. So next time someone tells you you're not doing enough, remember this. You're doing what you can, and for now, that's enough. The bare minimum isn't giving up, it's refusing to be used up. That's where we're at right now. You're refusing to be used up. I called us batteries yesterday in one of my videos. Sometimes the battery has to say no to going down to no charge because that's what Evil Corp would like. They want you to be completely without any power at the end of the day. They want to take it all from you. They want you to come home, have no energy to do anything else. But the reality is, you have to come home and figure out how you're going to make more money because that's the world we live in. It's not sufficient to just go to work. You've got to come home and have the energy to continue to work. As I've said, that's my life. I have to get up every morning, create content, get ready to go to work, come home, and create more content. It's the life of a content creator. You don't have a choice. If you're not uploading on a regular schedule, your viewers will stop coming back to your channel.